Today we're going to be talking about the third step of the Eightfold Path. It's going to be super quick in some ways. It's a pretty simple concept, but there's some depth to it and some mystery behind it that I think is really neat. But we're going to start with a review. Again, nice and simple, because this is such a nice path for all of us from a mental health and a spiritual perspective to understand because of its simplicity. But it's a challenge for the ego to pull off for sure, because it's not going to like a lot of these steps. But the idea, it's so simple that I'm going to keep it simple. So we're going to do right view real quick. And it's as simple as this. We suffer due to our attachment to our impermanent ego identities. I've heard it described as a case of mistaken identity, right? We falsely believe that these characters we're playing is our eternal identity in a way. You know, like if I die and make it to heaven, someone's going to say, hey, Steve is here, you know? That's not how that goes. But while I'm here, we suffer, and I suffer, when I over-identify with my impermanence. Remember, we talked about in the last one with right intention, we talked about what's known as anicca. Anicca is impermanence, and it's what causes the suffering. And if the ego is identifying with all of this impermanent stuff, the suffering is that. If we would stop over-identifying, notice I said over-identify. You're allowed to identify with your physical self. You should identify with your temporary self, especially when it comes to like red lights, right? Or playing in traffic. You know, there's things you should do and things you shouldn't do for your temporary self. But when we over-identify it, that's where the suffering comes in. And that's right view, just understanding that. The world suffers not because of all the stuff that keeps happening. The world suffers because we have a misidentification of who and what we really are, and we misunderstand why we suffer. Okay, so that's right view. Right intention, basically, and this is the perfect time to point this out, is the golden rule. Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. Now, Thich Nhat Hahn had mentioned last time when I discussed it that the problem with intention with most people is we project our own idea from the ego level of what would make another person happy. Okay? And we project that onto the person. Sometimes we're right, sometimes we're wrong. But it's coming from a lower level vibration, that type of projection. And if what we're doing is this person will be happy if I get them this present, well, that's impermanent. Maybe I get them a puppy, right? Or a diamond ring, or anything along those lines to make another person happy. And it might for a little, but it's not for the long haul, because we're still teaching impermanence. This will make you happy, that'll make you happy, and it's usually physical. Here's a sandwich. Here's a job, you know, and stuff like that. Well, what's the golden rule? People misunderstand that all the time. Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. So, like, if I, for Christmas, want a new puppy, I should get you a new puppy, right? Or if I, for Christmas, want a new shaver for my head, like I did this year, I should get you one then, shouldn't I? Doing unto others as you'd have them do unto me. That's what I want from you, right? Well, that's not what this rule's about. Actually, it's a Buddhist rule. To do unto others is the same as for what you would want them to do unto you, is, you know what? Help me understand that the cause of my suffering is my improper view. Help me understand that the reason I suffer is because I'm attached to impermanent things. Please help me do that. And here's an idea. I'll help you do that. That's the golden rule. Once you get right view, you can now have right intention. Like, okay. Now, what I should do for you, if I understand the reason and the cause of my suffering, is because of my attachments or my over-identification with my impermanent self. Once I know that, then that becomes my intention for you. That's what I'd want you to do for me. Please don't get me more addicted to stuff, all right? Please don't convince me that it's important who wins that football game, okay? Please help me detach from my physical obsession about physical life. And then I'll do that for you. That's the golden rule. It's also the right intention. And what we want to do with right intention and right thought is use our minds to cultivate a spirit of a compassionate heart. To truly care about another person is not to give them all the stuff that they need. It's something that the Buddha said too after he abandoned his wife and kid. He had millions of dollars. When he returned to his wife and kid, his son had demanded his inheritance. And you know what Buddha told him? I'll give you your inheritance. I'll give you all the wisdom you need. Right? Meanwhile, the kid wanted a check for $1 million, right? But are we really helping people when we give them money? Not really. I mean, maybe for a little bit. But you do really help people when you give them right view. And so that's right intention and right thought, is to understand that this is what's going to be really helpful. okay? To help a person stop suffering by having them understand the nature of their suffering. That's actually quite helpful. If you want to give them a sandwich or a check for $1 million, that's also fine. No problem there. But the key to the Eightfold Path is to establish right view and then to learn how to spread it. Which brings us to right speech. Okay? Third step of the Eightfold Path is right speech. And how are we going to use our word? Okay? Well, the basics are simple and logical, and we should all get this, and this is taught in Buddhism as well. No lying, no slander, no idle gossip, no quote-unquote foolish babble. I read that from one Buddhist teacher. Foolish babble. You know, social media, for the most part. You know, Twitter, or whatever it's called these days, there's a lot of foolish babble going on there. What is foolish babble? Of anything that's not this. Okay? Anything that is not directed or intended in the direction of right view. Okay? That would be called foolish babble. Now, can you be talking about things like the weather with the proper intention? Yes, you can. And here's the trick to this. What we think of as right speech is not the physical words that we're using. Right intention, as we said, is a spirit of a compassionate heart. Can you talk about the weather with the spirit of a compassionate heart? Yes, you can. And that's going to be right speech. Okay? It's an energy dynamic. It's super important. The energy dynamic is, for me, when I understand the physics of things, what entanglement is about. Wherever you guys go later tonight, or anyone out there that might be watching this, we're already connected through the science of entanglement. It's all spirit, it's all energy, it's all the time, we're always one, always. Like gravity, it's always working, we're always entangled. And so it doesn't really matter what we're talking about. If my compassionate heart is on, you'll feel it. We can talk about the weather. So what's doing the talking? My mouth or my heart? Okay? So we're going to get deeper into that in a second, but the basics, it makes sense. You know, try not to lie. You know, that's a good idea. Don't slander other people. The idle gossip is good too. Don't just talk trash on other people behind their back for no good reason. I mean, if there's a good reason, maybe, but it's normal ways we think, and we tend to think about, you tend to teach this to 5-year-olds anyways, okay? But let's go deeper. The concept is to do no harm. That's the idea, right? There's no reason to harm someone else in this process. But as we get deeper, I like to call it right intention speech, just to make it a little bit more clear. Because our intention doesn't really need speech. Yes, you should use the words that you're saying in the direction of right intention for sure. And like right now, I'm able to do that. Turn on a football game, I might not do that. But right now we're specifically talking about these noble truths, and so it's easier to have right speech. But that's not what it's always about, okay? Because not many people engage with me in this type of conversation. So what else is actually going on? First of all, wrong speech, I'm putting in quotes, wrong speech, I read one Buddhist teacher call it dissipating your energy. When you spend your time talking about other stuff that is not based upon right view and right intention, you're going to dissipate your energy. Imagine spending a lot of time cultivating a reservoir of love inside your heart, and then you engage in a lot of idle gossip, participating in foolish babble like, you know, American politics, and you're going to get drained pretty quickly as a result. Another teacher said, I think this is Thich Nhat Hahn, don't squander your resources. And my goodness, when we get sucked into discussions with people that aren't oriented towards truth, we end up very, very, very drained sometimes, don't we? And it's not what our intention was, but when we're not mindful, we're now vulnerable, and we're going to be taking this energy that we try to cultivate, and then it just leaks out of us. Okay? And so that would be called wrong speech. But let's keep going deeper. There is about 400 years ago, I think, a physicist and a spiritualist by the name of Emanuel Swedenborg. Can you guess what country he's from? Sweden. Emanuel Swedenborg, he said, among many things that he said that were really deep, and he was a man way ahead of his time, he said, every word is spiritual. And reading what he was talking about, but also getting into the physics of it, that's because every word is vibrational. And if I say a word, whatever it is, there's a tone in my voice, okay? And the tone is either coming from right view and right intention, or it isn't. You cannot fool Mother Nature. You either have a compassionate heart or you don't. Well, there's degrees in between. The degree to which you have a compassionate heart is going to be reflected in your voice. Now, of course, the other person might not be ready to hear it. They might not be able to tune in. But that's not your responsibility. Your job is to have the compassionate heart and let that be in your voice. And so every word is spiritual. There are some people who can't speak for any number of reasons, mutism, right? I think that's what it's called. And if they can't speak, well, then I guess what are they out of right speech? They can't do it? Well, what is actually going on with what word is? It's not about English language, okay? It's about the fact that the word is actually the speaking that your heart does, okay? And now, is it combined with the words that are coming out of my face right now? Yeah, it can be combined for sure. There's an energy and a resonance. But everyone is always speaking with their hearts all the time. And so that is always spiritual. What's coming out of your heart? I've heard the Buddha say, your heart should be a hose for compassion, okay? You should think of it as like constantly having compassion coming out of your heart. Well, then you're speaking whether you're using words or not, right? Animals can do this. And they do it quite well with lots of compassion. Do they use English? No, they don't need to. And so every word is spiritual, gets us off the idea of thinking about the actual physical words that we're using, okay? English and French and Spanish and German and all that kind of stuff. And realize it's the vibration in the word is that what they're really talking about. And that is backed by right intention. Now, to prove that a little bit more, to go deeper, we have The Four Agreements, one of my favorite all-time therapy books. I recommend everyone read it. Don Miguel Ruiz. And The Four Agreements, his first agreement is to be impeccable with your word. And I've always loved that word, impeccable. What it doesn't mean is never lie, okay? If my lovely wife were headed into an appointment or a speaking engagement, and she says, how's my hair look? And I didn't think it looked perfect. Am I supposed to say, ugh, not so good right now, hon? Or should I say, it looks great, go do a good job? Aren't I a liar if I say that wrong? I never do that. I always tell you the truth, okay? If my wonderful father one day reaches his deathbed and he says to me, son, was I always a great dad? Am I going to pull up my little list of mistakes that he made? I mean, of course you're always great, and you were great dad all the time. You were great. Are we supposed to be honest? Or my favorite, if a little kid walks in here before Christmas, 4 years old, and says, I'm excited, Santa Claus is coming next week. Am I supposed to say, hey, I'm not allowed to lie, right speech insists that I don't lie, there's no Santa Claus? See, that's not never lying. It's what's in your heart. Be impeccable with your word. Your word is the spiritual thing, okay? And what comes out of your heart is what matters. Can I tell a kid, I know, that's so exciting. What's Santa going to bring you? Am I a liar now? No, of course not. I'm transmitting love and compassion from my heart to his. That's being impeccable. Okay? And so your word, again, isn't just truth, what I have with a small t and a capital T. There's a larger picture going on. Isn't God, whatever God is, quite deceptive with the illusory nature of reality that we're in? Why would God trick us so? Why did Jesus only speak in parables? Because it's a mystical creation that we're in, and it's difficult and challenging. Isn't it also deceptive? Yeah, that's the definition of illusion. Illusion has a deceptive appearance. We're being tricked. But isn't that part of the journey? Isn't that part of the fun? Okay? To be able to interpret what's going on in this illusion matters a lot. Well, same thing here with our word. If we're impeccable, and you know if you are, is compassion coming out of your heart or not? And that's all you can control. When Jesus told people stuff like, Satan, get behind me, or he called some of the leaders of his day a den or a brood of vipers, those are aggressive things, but was his heart compassionate? Oh yeah, it was in the right space all the time. And so the words English might not sound nice, but the impeccability comes from the spiritual nature that's behind them. And we'll go deeper with what I will call a little bit even more proof. John 1:1, the first sentence in the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God. The Word was God. So the word that we're talking about, that we're wrapping into the Eightfold Path here, the type of speech we're talking about is distinctly the language of the heart called love. In 1 John it says later on that God is love, okay? And then it says that the Word was God. So what does that make the word? Love. It's not English, it's not French, it's not German. I think we all know that. God didn't speak language to create this world. He spoke love to create this world. And when we talk about whatever God is, it's a loving force for sure. And that was what was in the beginning. It was this force called love. And we come from that force called love. And we're here in that force called love. That's what it's all about. That's what the Word is. People read the Bible. You think the Bible has a specific intention in it? Of course, the people who wrote the Bible, they were loaded with intention. What about all the great spiritual texts? There's an intention in there. And beyond, even people might have false intentions or human or ego intentions. Behind all of that, the creation of the world was set up with this very specific intention. I love the way Kabbalah describes it. It set us up to experience delight. That's the ultimate intention of the universe, which is basically this. You will figure this out. All of us do. We all figure out that we're love. And then once we get that idea as something to shoot for, like an archetype, we can now be in right speech all the time. Now I can always be focused on the idea that, hey, I'm love, you're love. We're all love. Now we understand why we talked about in right view, to love another as oneself. Because if you're love and they're love, and God is love, then all the words that I'm using are love. Then I have to do one thing. I have to be mindful when I use physical words. I have to be mindful of the love that's behind them. Now that'll be transmitted by the heart. Right? It's why the Course in Miracles says this. The Holy Spirit interprets the body as a communication device. Love that line. It gives me chills every time I think of it. Right? We think of our bodies as who we are. But our bodies, well, I was looking for my phone. It's recording. Our bodies are like our iPhones. Okay? They're communication devices. And what is it that they're communicating? In most cases, a lot of not love. All the opposite of love. The fear, the shame, the guilt, the judgment, and all that stuff that the vibrations none of us really like, and yet we're addicted to. And yet, if we are love, and Word is love, and God is love, and we are made in God's image, and we're love, and we keep thinking we're these bodies, this is where we fail. And we think we're separate from this God, which we couldn't be, based upon the entanglement of things, okay? And so if you consider your body to be a communication device, and your heart is a part of your body, and the Word, as we're talking about, is literally your heart doing the speaking, and you combine it with the physical speech that you actually use, okay? Now we've got right intention and right view. Now each and every communication I have with the person, I can be impeccable, because what we're supposed to do, according to the Buddha, is you're supposed to use your word to help others stop suffering by what? By helping them understand right view. And if all we're doing is trying to help people experience better physical lives, that's nice for a while, but they're going to end up suffering. We talked about this last week, also with miracles. You're either going to be among the saviors of the world or remain in hell and keep your brother there, okay? But right speech helps break past that, okay? Because if your intention is to help others see what right view is, and so that they can also escape the suffering for themselves, then every word that you use, coming from your heart, and all the language that you use with it, is going to have right intention, and it's going to be based on love.